X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting Battle of the Atom. This is your premier X-Men podcast, where I, Zach Jenkins, and my co-host, Adam Reck, talk about 3 different X-Men stories, and then we put them on a list from best to worst X-Men story of all time. Now, Adam, I do need to ask, in the year of our Lord 2017, on this great day of December 16th, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited because I think we're going to be talking about some really wacky stuff today.
We are talking about some wacky stuff. We're talking about 3 stories that friend of the show, I think we can call him friend of the show. He's been a guest. Dennis Hopeless. Yeah. Dennis Hopeless, You're the guy writing Jean Grey, and you listen to that whole interview. You can go back to get all those details. We were planning on doing this episode for the 3 titles that he had selected right afterwards, but then we got busy with some Thor stuff, and then we got busy with some Leah Williams, and then it just turned into this whole event.
Yeah, I think it's about time that we caught back up with Dennis's recommendations, because if you guys remember, at the end of that show, we did ask him what he would recommend that we cover for an episode, and he picked some pretty interesting stuff that had been working its way into his work over the course of his X-Men career. So I think after having reread these, I totally understand why he picked them, and I'm glad we get to cover this stuff today.
Yes, and just as a programming note, we were going to ask Leah Williams the same question, and then we got very distracted and forgot.
We could probably hit her up on Twitter and get some requests, and we'll see if we can get that going.
We will see if we can get that going, but in the meantime, we've got some stories. The first story that we wanted to cover today is X-Men Volume 1, Number 8, The Uncanny Threat of Unus the Untouchable.
And boy, is he untouchable. You can't do anything. He's not going to be touched.
Yes. So this is a Stan and Jack joint with Chick Stone doing the inks over Jack's pencils. This is early X-Men, and I think we've made our feelings known about early X-Men, but
yeah.
On my website, XavierFiles.com, where I rank all of the X-Men, Unus was one of, I think he was like number 8, like the 8th one that I did. So this was a couple years back at this point. Unus became the bottom of my list for a very long time. So I have some mixed feelings about Unus the Untouchable.
I don't know. I think he has some real merit. I mean, there's something incredibly goofy and funny about him. I think as we hit the Silver Age stuff and try and compare it to more contemporary stories, we're starting to see what the magic of these Silver Age stories might be, even if they don't necessarily always stand up on their own 2 feet. What I'm fascinated by about this is, Dennis recommended this because if I remember correctly, when the O5 do finally get a chance to time travel back, they do see that there is another Silver Age X-Men team fighting Unus. Am I saying that right? Unus?
Unus? It's Unus or Unus. I don't know.
Let's go with Unus.
It's questionably Greek. Is what I've learned. His real name is Gunther.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Unus is his wrestling name.
Yeah. All right. So I get why Dennis likes this. Like when he was on the show, he talked a little bit about why this is such goofy, silly fun. And this is everything that Dennis advertised, because this issue does have a lot of really fun, quirky things that we haven't seen in the other Silver Age X-Men that we've covered so far. In the Juggernaut story, we got sort of this suspense story of the Juggernaut getting ready to attack. But this is a really fun kind of goofy Silver Age, random villain story. And I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I will say that even though I did put Unus at the very bottom of my list, I recommended this story because it's a lot of fun.
It is.
Unus he's kind of just a dingbat during the whole thing. He's what somehow, and it will become relevant on our next episode. Kurt Busiek found his way into our comments, and he had a lot of good things to say about Unus the Untouchable, just because he's kind of dumb, but he's kind of charming, especially in this Silver Age story.
Yeah, and to be clear, you're referring to Unus, not Kurt Busiek.
No, Kurt Busiek just has bad opinions on Silver Age X-Men, and that's fine. He's allowed to. I get it.
Yeah, he really likes his Silver Age, and he was
Age.
very nice about clarifying that for us, which I thought was good. I personally, I love the idea in this issue that Unus is just like he really wants to be a supervillain. He's got some dreams, and he wants to join that brotherhood, and it just isn't going to work out for him.
Yeah.
Today is not his day.
So what happens in this story is that the X-Men going out on the town, trying to enjoy being graduates, because they graduated in 7 issues, by the way. They were done being X-Men students at the end of issue 6, and they had a photo shoot the next page.
It happened pretty fast.
Yeah. So Professor X is out exploring caves in his mechanical Jack Kirby wheelchair, and Cyclops is running drills on the X-Men, and eventually Bobby and Hank decide to go out on the town, and they get harassed for being mutants. This is the first time we really tangibly see it. That's one thing I like about this issue, and really the back half of Stan and Jack's run on X-Men, is that things finally start to line up and make sense to be the X-Men that we think it is.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I just reread Marvel's the Alex Ross
Kurt
Busiek thing, and my favorite issue of that is the X-Men issue, and it is essentially this scene stretched out for an entire issue with an additional perspective of the protagonist. But I think this is kind of integral to explaining what happens much later with the X-Men that we know and love, as more violence occurs with humanity and mutant kind. This kind of sets the table for that.
Yeah, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of the seeds of Scott and Jean's will they, won't they, that will go on for too long. You get a lot of cool stuff in this issue. And then you get Hank quitting the X-Men. You get Hank deciding that I'm not going to deal with saving these people that hate me, which, another 05 connection, is exactly when Beast comes and takes the 05 out. Right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, then that makes sense that when they do travel back, that this is what they're doing.
I was waiting for you to connect those dots. I really was.
Okay.
Though I am mad at Bendis because there is a joke where Bobby is talking in his All New is talking about how great the original X-Men are, and he says, Unus the Untouchable? I touched him. And I was like, no, you didn't.
No, because that didn't happen yet. Yeah. All right.
But anyway, Hank becomes a wrestler, and in the professional wrestling world of Marvel, it's not scripted. It's just a real thing. And Unus goes, and he's another wrestler, and he can't be touched. He has a force field, which... I'm not a wrestling guy. Adam, are you a wrestling guy? Are you one of those WWE boys?
I am not. When I was a kid, I was really into it, but it just didn't follow me into adulthood, unfortunately.
It's got to be the worst wrestling match in the world if you can't touch one of the dudes, right?
Yeah, I mean, the match
not entertaining.
Pretty much consists of the Beast in rubber ball mode, like just kind of bouncing off the guy. And, it makes it interesting that people like him, Unus, so much, because that's all that happens when you're in the ring with him. He doesn't throw anybody. He doesn't, there's no body slamming or elbows to the face. He's just like going to stand there and you're going to bounce off of him, which doesn't sound like it would make for a good match.
That's a bad show. That's a bad show for everyone involved.
Yeah.
I'll say during that fight, Jack Kirby's Jack Kirby. All right. And it's kinetic and it's great. And it's everything I want in the Silver Age.
Yeah.
Like this is a Jack Kirby comic, and I do love that about it.
Well, and we've got to, touch on the fact that this is an interesting transition issue for the character of the Beast, because he's going from sort of, Ben Grimm light to he's also going to be invention guy in this episode. He gets a chance to kind of flex those intellectual muscles that he becomes known for, sort of the mad scientist angle. And I love the solution to this story. I mean, it's so Silver Age that we're going to hype up Unus's powers so much that he can't eat anymore.
He can't smoke. The cigarettes won't let him smoke.
That's right. He just keeps reaching for things and they keep flying away from him. And there's something about that scene that is just such an animated, silly moment. And it's great. I enjoyed reading this a lot.
Well, you don't think of Silver Age Jack Kirby Stan Lee as being intentionally a funny thing.
Right.
You don't. You see there's some goofy stuff looking back. This is a freaking humor scene at the end. This is a joke book to end this story. And it's fantastic. And I absolutely love it. Worst case, guys, get up on Marvel Unlimited or find a copy of this incredibly reprinted book and flip to the last 4 pages. It's real good. And it's a much better resolution to Unus stories than every other time when he appears, when he suffocates on his own bubble. That's happened 3 times. He's died for reals multiple times because of that.
I really like the panel on the last page where he can finally grasp this slice of cake, and he's just so overwhelmed by enjoy. He's staring so lustfully at the slice of cake. It's great.
So I do love that. The only other thing about Unus I really like, I think he has at least 2 kids who have become superheroes / supervillains.
Interesting.
There was one in Alpha Flight and one in the Acolytes, Unison or whatever her name was.
Interesting.
I don't know. All the Acolytes look the same to me. Does that make me racist? I don't think so. I think they're just
it's more of a fashion thing.
Yeah, that's a good
Lots
point.
of braids, lots of gold paneling.
Now that we've talked Unus to death, where would we rank him? I would say this is the best Silver Age X-Men story that we have on the list thus far.
Absolutely. I like this a bunch. I thought it was really fun. So I'm looking for my bottom here on the list, and I'm thinking I enjoyed it more than Exiles 1 and 2.
I think I liked it more than Astonishing Tales Mojo World.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is some serious fun, and it has all the over the top stuff, that was recommended to us. I might have even liked this more than the Dracula issue. I don't know. Where are you looking at?
I keep looking at this list. I think I'd rather read it than Battle of the Atom. This is a good Silver Age book. This is solid. It's just everything else Unus has ever been in is kind of dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. But this as a unit, as just a standalone story is really quality Silver Age fun stuff. So I think that's a good spot for it. I know you probably don't want to put it above your beloved Exterminators. So
it's not better than Exterminators. It's not better than that first Peter David arc of X Factor.
So that's where it's going to go.
That's where it'll be. And that, my friends, is the new number 30 on our list between Inferno Exterminators and Battle of the Atom. X-Men number 8, Unus the Untouchable. Next on our list is an arc from the book Cable. Now, Dennis Hopeless, the spirit guide of this list, I think he's been showing us the way through this list, is Cable Volume 2, numbers 7 through 10, Waiting for the End of the World. This is during the Cable and Baby era, and now, Adam, you've read Messiah Complex,
right?
Messiah War,
right?
And now this arc in Cable.
Yes, which is I read 6 to 10. I think we're just going to rank 7 to 10.
Is that the most Cable way to read a Cable story? Just jumping all through the different timelines.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a good way to approach Cable is to read it completely out of context and out of continuity, so that you have no idea what's going on, exactly like Cable's actual story, which makes absolutely zero sense at any point in time whatsoever. But I'm really glad that I read this because it provides such great context for what we read in Messiah War. And I really wish I had read these few issues before we did that, because I think it may have changed my opinion of Messiah War a little bit more.
And now, careful listeners will remember that I said that this would help him like Messiah War more,
Yeah.
all the way back in episode where we covered Messiah War.
It's true.
Just saying.
Yeah.
But this was written by Dwayne Switzer.
I would say Swarzynski.
Okay, see, I wasn't gonna get close to that. We're gonna call him Dwayne Dwayne. What Adam said.
Swarzynski.
Swarzynski.
Swarzynski. That's going to be my guess. I can't say that I'm like an expert in name pronunciations, but that's where I'm going with it.
Don't worry, he'll never listen to this, so we'll be good. With all the art by Ariel Olivetti. This is a story about Cable and his redheaded baby, who he just calls Little Girl, going to this secret town in the United States because it's one of the few places that he knows is going to be safe. And having a life there. Cable gets married to this woman named Hope, and he becomes at peace raising his daughter.
Yeah, it's kind of an Old Man Logan type story.
Yep.
You know, he settles down, and there's a little bit of a. I wrote in my notes that when the cockroach people do finally show up, there's a little bit of a John Wick scenario here where he has to, dig through the concrete to get to his secret box full of weapons and
Cable has a box of guns.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just kind of buried in the front yard so that he can go savage on the cockroach people, which that element alone to this story, it gives the entire thing a real Twilight Zone, goofy sci-fi aspect to it that works really well within this context.
Yeah. Let's point out that the entirety of the United States has been taken over by half cockroach, half people, one of which walks out in his armor and introduces himself by pulling off his helmet and saying, "I'm the president of the United States." It's the funniest gag. I tell you what, it's perfect. Anyway, Cable kills a bunch of roaches, and then they go on the run. Him and his wife and the wee baby, who remains nameless until the very end of this story, when sadly, because this had to wrap up this way, Cable's wife gets shot and she dies. And
a bit of a disappointing, fridging situation there that I wish they had handled a little bit differently.
So here's the way I look at this. I don't see Hope's death as providing any motivation for Cable at all.
Okay.
I honestly don't, because he already had his job.
Yeah.
What I think her role in this story more was to show that, hey, you can be a father, you can be a parent, and this kid isn't just going to be able to be the child of a soldier. It's going to have to be the child of a person. And I like that aspect of it. I definitely agree that there's a bit of a feeling of fridging in that. I also, just knowing the story of Cable, it felt like an inevitability more than anything else.
Sure. And it doesn't really help that because of the limited number of issues here, and we know this is going to speed up real fast, and then we're going to get to some sort of conclusion. We don't get a lot of character development with the woman that he marries. So you're right. For story purposes, she serves those, but it would have been interesting to have her be more of an interesting character for a longer term. But Cable doesn't work that way.
No.
Just as a comic, it never does.
Which is, to me, part of the reason why it's interesting to pair him up with the baby, who he obviously, by the end of this, names after his late wife, Hope. Which makes reading this with that knowledge very confusing.
Yeah, I think the other thing I really enjoyed about these issues is that I talked in the Messiah War issue about my issues with Bishop.
Oh, yeah.
And how I felt that was a little bit of a character assassination. This does give a little bit more of a transition between the character we see in Complex and the character that we're seeing in Messiah War, because I think what's added here is that essentially there's two parallel stories here. We've got Cable in the future, but we also have Cyclops who's managed to trap Bishop and kind of goes all Homeland on him, with Emma torturing him and trying to get the information that he needs to find Hope. So we get a little bit more of a rationale for the way that Bishop works and why he is who he is when we actually get to Messiah War. And I'm glad that there was that, I kind of shortchanged that when I read War by itself.
Bishop becomes interesting here because he's unabashedly the villain of this story, but he's the villain with very set motives that are internally consistent. Like this is a story where Bishop is literally all right with raising the entire Earth in the future, destroying everything, because in his mind, in his rationale, he knows that he kills Hope, his future doesn't come about. That entire future, whatever it is, Hope's gone. The future's going to reset. It's not going to happen. He's not going to just like those people are NPCs in a video game to him. They don't count. They aren't real. So yes, he has to do this horrible thing, but they aren't going to matter.
And that reveal, when it finally comes that in the future timelines, he is just like absolutely decimated multiple continents. And he's explaining to Cyclops how he did it in this very like calm, casual way. It's just like, hey, this is what needs to get done. It is extremely effective. It's a really cool scene and scary. And it makes him much more of a three-dimensional villain than sort of just like the screaming, ranting character that you see in Messiah War, where he's totally been pushed over the edge.
Yeah, I agree. I think this does a lot of good work for Bishop and Cable, and this might be my favorite arc in this entire Cable run. And this is a run that I enjoy a lot. I've talked about that a ton. Like reading that issue 10 where it's Cable and Hope on the road, him realizing how he's proud of her, the things that she's done that he never expected his child to be able to do.
Yeah.
It resonates with me just a little bit.
Sure.
Like I like that, being a parent and being a parent of a kid who's going through the years where they surprise you with their development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's hope that our children don't become, like super soldiers who know when the best time to shiv somebody is. But
Look.
I understand what you're talking about.
If my son can find a way to detonate some Simtex and blow up some roaches, I will at least be surprised. Where do we want to rank this one?
I'm looking to where we actually put Messiah War. And I like this more than I like Messiah War, because I think it has some really great character beats, and I like the way it goes back and forth between the Bishop storyline and the Cable storyline.
Definitely.
Which
Messiah War right now is at number 23 between Executioner's Song and Excalibur Mojo Mayhem.
Yeah, I mean, I think objectively this is better than Executioner's Song.
It is.
Because that's just, it's, I like that because of its like over the top, silliness. Is it better than X-Men and Alpha Flight Volume 1? I mean, I think that it really does a very good job of setting up the big next stage crossover event, whereas X-Men and Alpha Flight is sort of a standalone beautiful story in and of itself. So I don't know, how high do you want to go here?
I actually like where you're looking. I don't think this is better than Giant Size X-Men number 1, which is a very good story. Yeah. I do think I've never gone back to X-Men and Alpha Flight, even though I know objectively it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. I definitely have gone back to this Cable story several times. So I think that's where it goes as our new number 21, Cable Volume 3, 7-10, Waiting for the End of the World. I think I said that right. I accidentally closed out the tab, so I don't know the actual title. I'm sorry, guys. But I do know the title of this next one. I know the title of this next one. Adam, do you know the title of this next one?
Yeah, this is an absolute classic. You can't forget this one.
This is New X-Men 134 to 138, Riot at Xavier's.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure there are some Quentin Quire fans out there who are very excited that we get a chance to talk about this. And I think this may have come up as part of our conversation with Dennis because he did the issue of Jean Grey, where when she pops into Emma's mind, they're kind of transported back into this era, this Morrison era. So this is obviously a great resource for him.
Yeah.
And this was a lot of fun to go back and reread.
So let me just give the 1,000-mile in the sky approach to what happens at Riot, because Riot is dense. Riot is an incredibly dense story. Mutant fashion designer Jumbo Carnation dies, causing a big uproar in the mutant subculture because he was a big deal. Quentin Quire, who is a nice, good telepath boy, finds out that he was adopted, and it kind of breaks him. Now, I'm just going to say this right away. If any of you are preparing to talk to your children about them being adopted, don't do it over telephone. Don't do that, people.
Also, don't do it if your adopted son is an Omega level telepath.
Also, yes.
Just the thought. Who also might be like, hopped up on Kick.
Yeah. This introduces Kick, which is the Grant Morrison mutant power enhancing drug made from John Sublime, who was a bacteria who is one of the first living beings on Earth and hates mutants.
Yeah, now just to clarify, this is different than HGH in the mutant universe here, right? They're two separate things. Kick
because HGH isn't a sentient bacteria.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I clarified that.
Yes.
All right, you were summarizing this as best you could.
I was. So anyway, we get that. Quentin Quire decides to be very anti-authoritarian and very much, hey, you know what, Professor X? You keep saying mutants shouldn't inherit the Earth and we shouldn't be in charge, but what if we were? Like, would that be bad? Is that wrong think around here? Just being just a real teenage dirtbag.
He's
just a
mini fascist.
a little fascist. There's a little bit of fascism in there. Yeah, that's true.
No?
But he goes through all of that and he starts his own revolution. He gets everyone in their own thoughts, their own fashion designs, all hopped up on Kick, and he causes a riot at Xavier's. In the meantime, Zorn is taking the special class out for a camping trip. Angel and Beak, they do the nasty.
They have relations.
They have mutant relations, and they man, what was the word I was looking for in my mouth? No, anyway, they get attacked by the U-Men, who are worshippers of John Sublime and his theories about the third race or whatever it is. And then Zorn does secret, creepy stuff to murder a lot of them. They all get back at this riot, and then the Stepford Cuckoos stop the heck out of this riot that just... You get the whole feeling. Like, we call it Riot at Xavier's like it's a big event. Thing lasts for minutes. There's 1.5 casualties, which is not a small thing, but this big revolution that Quire had and what he's remembered for was a nothing event at the end of the day, especially in the world of the X-Men and the world of Xavier's. It was a nothing from everything.
They do kill a couple people along the way, though, correct?
So Sophie dies stopping him. Cuckoo.
But don't they like go out as a gang and kill some people before the actual
they murdered some people who were bad to humans because they're bad to mutants because they thought humans murdered Jumbo Carnation,
right?
Which turns out is not true. No, he was just high on Kick,
right?
And and then at the end, Jean Grey catches Cyclops and Emma Frost in a psychic affair where Emma is dressed like the Dark Phoenix. And classic. Quentin Quire ascends to a higher level of being.
Right, because Xavier claims that he's dead at the end.
He's
correct?
gas in a jar. He's gas in a jar.
Yeah. This arc has so many really like if you're going to go back and do classic Morrison new X-Men, like this to me is what you go back to.
Yes.
E for Extinction is really fun. But it's great to see a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a nice compressed, lots of stuff going on, 4-issue block where we don't have a variety of artists. We have Quitely on every single issue, and he's killing it.
Kieran Grant does do 134. Quitely does. Yeah,
does he?
134 is kind of the.
Oh, okay. I wasn't counting. I was just going 135 to 138. Because that's what's taglined on the covers.
Right.
But the issues where you do get the artist shift are so dramatic because Quitely is such, he's so good. There's a reason that these issues are like held in such high esteem, but I think people forget how few of them he actually did. There's a lot of fill-in art that's not Quitely. So to see 4 back-to-back issues that are so good and the action sequences are outstanding. Just if you look at the first 6 pages of 138, they're just this like awesome action sequence with Herman Glob on fire running down the street and Xorn trying to stop him. It's a very, very awesome story from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and Quitely is phenomenal. There's a reason why he is one of the most well-regarded artists working in comics today. And him teaming up with Grant Morrison, who is Grant Morrison. Like, does anything else need to be said about Grant Morrison? People, that Grant Morrison is very good at comics and possibly has met Superman.
Well, and I just want to be on record for the Morrison run is an interesting one in that it goes off the rails not too far after this with the Magneto stuff. We're not that far away in this story from when things really sort of, when we get Xorneto and things get really, really weird. But by this point, I think we've already had Phantom X.
Yep.
We've already had Evil Extinction, and we already had the Shi'ar stuff. So there's some really, really classic core stuff that's already been hit by here. But this to me is the peak. I like this the best out of all of the new X-Men stories that they did.
Hey, can I do a digression on Xorneto just for 1 second?
Oh, please.
So
yeah, please digress.
A lot of people get upset about Planet X, the Xorneto arc in New X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
And I did too the first time I read it, because I read it probably back 2013, I think was actually the first time I was able to go back to this story. And I thought it seemed out of place based on, what I thought of in my mind as Magneto. Recently, within the last couple of months, I read a chunk of the late 90s X-Men stuff, the Magneto War stuff, I forget the name of it, the Scott Lobdell arc that was done right before Morrison got on Adjectiveless. And that Magneto is the same Magneto that you see in this story. He's a terrorist. He's a fascist. He is the Extinction or the Fatal Attractions Magneto turned up to 11. That was consistent with the character that was being written. However, the combination of mostly Ian McKellen in that movie resetting what people think of when they think of Magneto, and then going back to the Claremont run, which is the classic Magneto, it doesn't look good outside of that, but I definitely see where Morrison was going, and I have a lot more respect for the character choices that were made after going back and reevaluating some of that stuff.
Wow, I was not expecting you to go on the Xorneto.
I wasn't either. So. It was very frustrating when I found out that I was wrong once in the past. It's like, dang it.
No, you do bring up a good point, because I think if there are folks out there like I was who kind of faded out in the 90s with their X-Men reading, and then you came back because you were like, everybody's saying this is the run, you got to check this out, and you're reading this going, wait, what? That's not the Magneto that I remember. I think you've got a really good point there. I want to point out just one last thing before we rank this, and that is that one of my favorite things about this arc is the quote unquote adults and the way in which they handle the sort of like say no to drugs elements of this storyline. The way that Xavier and Emma talk to the students and kind of, talk down to them about these conflicts. It's really funny. There's a Hellions joke in there at one point, and it's great.
I love this because it keeps reminding me. Everyone thinks of the Stepford Cuckoos as, little Emmas because they are. But the Stepford Cuckoos don't actually like Emma all that much, and they never have, and
Right.
that stays consistent. Like, even after this run, they aren't on Emma's Hellions when they split up the school into teams. They're on Scott Summers'
Mhm.
team. They don't
Right.
go to Scott Summers' resistance because of Emma. They go because they trust in Scott. It's very
Mhm.
interesting to see, and a lot of that resentment comes here because Emma, the adult, the person that was supposed to watch out for them, isn't strong enough to save Sophie.
Mhm.
And then they go and say, "Hey, Emma, screw you. Gene, you're going to want to see this." It's awesome. I love the Stepford Cuckoos. Like, here's going to be a spoiler for something called The Gifted. All I'm going to say is about 3.5, 4 weeks ago, the character named Esme, who was a blonde telepath who keeps talking about her family, showed up. And I swear, in 2017, we are getting a show that has the Stepford Cuckoos talking about Kick because all that has happened.
You're making me want to go back and catch up because I kind of stopped watching that after a couple episodes.
I did
so,
too.
that's exciting.
I catch
Well,
up
maybe
on
I'll do
that
a little
one.
binge over the holidays.
Yeah, it's
All
very
right,
repetitive.
That's okay. It's a very much a network show.
Yes.
Where do we want to rank Riot at Xavier's?
Riot at Xavier's is the best thing Grant Morrison wrote about X-Men. It is in the and I hold Grant Morrison's new X-Men run as the single best run of X-Men since Claremont was off the book.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Now I hold that as there are individual stories that I like better, but as a
Right.
cohesive run, it's incredibly good.
Mm-hmm.
I
I think this is top 10 material. So
this is better than Life Death 2. This is better than X-Men 1 through 3 Mutant Genesis. Yes. So we talked about when we were doing the Asgard episode that we kind of have a drop off on this list. We have incredibly classic stories. Days of Future Past at number 1, of course. God Loves Man Kills, Asgardian War, and Wolverine, the Frank Miller, Chris Claremont run. And then we have Max Bemis's Worst X-Man Ever, which is a story I love.
Yeah.
This is better than that.
I think so. So I think the cap here might be whether you're willing to go above Wolverine Volume 1. I don't think I would put it above that, but what are you thinking?
Here's the problem. This is the best Grant Morrison new X-Men story, but this isn't even the best Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely story ever written and done.
No, it's not.
Where Wolverine, there is a decent argument that it's the best Frank Miller story or it's the best Chris Claremont story. Like, I don't know if I buy those arguments, but I would listen to them. Where New X-Men, I'd say, hey, look, I love the book to death, but Flex Mentallo and freaking Multiversity Pax Americana do exist, so maybe slow your roll a second.
Well, then maybe it's number 5. I think that's
it is
a
number
very
5.
very solid place to put it on the list.
It is really good. So number 5 between Wolverine number 1 and X-Men Worst X-Men Ever is Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's New X-Men Riot at Xavier's. And that does it for this week, doesn't it?
And thank you, Dennis, for recommending these awesome stories. It was really fun to revisit these.
Great time to revisit them. Now, as we wrap up, normally every episode is brought to us. Actually, every episode is still brought to us by the lovely Patreons at patreon.com. But if you do want to support the show, you can go over to patreon.com/Xavier Files. At the $2 a month level, you can actually get an entire episode of Battle of the Atom created all for you based on one of your recommendations. And that's a lot of fun. We have a couple of those coming up soon that I'm pretty excited for. Beyond that, everything associated with Battle of the Atom can be found at XavierFiles.com, where I also have weekly X-Men articles. This week, I've written my 100th article. Will have gone up by the time you listen to this.
Nice, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It's a crazy thing.
Now that one's your Ulysses length treatise on a specific character. correct?
It's Charles Xavier. This you will know that it's Charles Xavier because it will exist at the time. I figured it was cute because it's the 100th one and it's the Xavier files. Get it? It's a whole fun thing. Anyway, it's really hard to write a lot about Charles Xavier because he does a lot of stuff, then he disappears for huge swaths of time.
That's a very good point. Fakes his death quite a few times.
Like, I'm counting, but there's a lot at this point that he's either been thought to be assassinated, all this stuff. Anyway, you can check that out in the article. You can also check out my other X-Men thoughts at Xavier Files on Twitter, where I tweet about X-Men. I also have links to this show and all that. Now, Adam Reck, where can people find you online?
You guys can always follow me at Arthur Stacy. My website's adamreck.tumblr.com. In the time that the episodes aired last, and when this goes on the air, I'll have had the Big Cartel store open, adamrec.bigcartel.com, to do a sales for the print version of Bish and Jupe. So hopefully you guys were following on Twitter and you saw that. If you missed the orders for the print run, just shoot me a message. I'm kind of toying with the idea of whether I need to extend that or not, because I don't know if everybody is aware of it. If you did miss it completely, I'm still probably going to do a downloadable PDF through that same platform. And you guys will be able to get a copy of that way.
Go pick it up. Bish and Juice is very good, and I can't wait for my copy that I know is in the mail right now. Thank you, Adam.
It is in the mail, so I hope you enjoy it.
I intend to. And I hope all of you guys enjoyed this week's Battle of the Atom. It was a lot of fun. Next week, join us for our X-Men Xmas special, where we're gonna talk about some Santa. We're gonna sing some songs, maybe share some laughs, have a good time. Until then, this has been Battle of the Atom. I hope you survived the experience.
Get it!